There is a quiet shift happening in the Philippines. Not the kind that makes loud headlines overnight. Not the kind that trends for a week and disappears. This one is slower, deeper, and far more consequential. It is happening in remote coastal towns where wind turbines are rising against orange sunsets. In wide, sun-drenched plains where solar panels now stretch farther than the eye can see. In boardrooms in Singapore, Tokyo, New York, and London, where maps of the Philippine archipelago are pinned to screens during investment meetings. Global investors are betting big on Philippine sustainable energy projects. And for many of them, this is not a small side move. It is a strategic, long-term commitment. To understand why, you have to begin with a simple truth. Energy is the foundation of modern growth. For decades, the Philippines has struggled with some of the highest electricity prices in Southeast Asia. Businesses have felt it. Families have felt it. Manufacturing costs rise. Household bills eat into salaries. Energy insecurity has always been one of the country's quiet burdens. But pressure creates opportunity. The Philippines sits on extraordinary renewable energy potential. It is one of the most geothermal-rich countries in the world. It has strong wind corridors, especially in northern Luzon and parts of the Visayas. It is bathed in sunlight for most of the year. And being an archipelago, it has vast coastlines ideal for offshore wind development. For years, much of that potential remained underdeveloped. Now, that is changing. Part of the shift comes from necessity. The Philippines is one of the most climate-vulnerable countries on Earth. Typhoons grow stronger. Floods become more destructive. Heat becomes more intense. Climate change is not abstract here. It is personal. Entire communities rebuild again and again. Investors see this vulnerability, but they also see resolve. The government has been steadily reshaping policy to attract foreign capital into renewables. Ownership rules have been relaxed in certain sectors. Permitting processes, though still imperfect, are being streamlined. Renewable portfolio standards are pushing utilities to source more green energy. There are clearer roadmaps now, signals that long-term planning is taking root. For global capital, policy clarity matters. But policy alone is not enough. What truly excites investors is the convergence of three forces: demand, demographics, and decarbonization. First, demand. The Philippine economy has been one of the faster-growing in Southeast Asia in recent years. A young population, rising urbanization, expanding digital industries, all of these require power. Data centers are growing. Manufacturing zones are expanding. Cities are stretching outward. Electricity demand is expected to keep rising for decades. That demand needs to be met somehow. For global investors managing billion-dollar funds, this represents predictability. Energy demand in the Philippines is not stagnating. It is climbing, and long-term energy contracts, especially in renewables, provide stable, recurring returns. Second, demographics. The median age in the Philippines is young. A young workforce means long-term consumption, long-term productivity, and long-term infrastructure needs. Investors think in 10, 20, even 30-year horizons. A country with a growing, youthful population signals sustained expansion. And third, decarbonization. Across the globe, institutional investors are under pressure. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and multinational corporations are being pushed by shareholders and regulators to reduce carbon exposure. Fossil fuel assets increasingly carry risk. Not just environmental risk, but financial risk. Stranded assets, carbon taxes, regulatory crackdowns. Renewables, by contrast, are aligned with the global direction of travel. When international funds look at the Philippines today, they see a developing economy that still needs to build infrastructure from the ground up. That means renewable systems can be integrated at scale without replacing massive legacy coal infrastructure, as is the case in some older economies. In many ways, the Philippines is building its next energy chapter in real time. There is also a geographic reality that investors find compelling. The archipelagic structure of the country creates both challenges and opportunities. Off-grid islands rely heavily on diesel, which is expensive and volatile in price. Replacing diesel generation with solar battery hybrid systems is not just environmentally sound, it is economically smart. Microgrids, distributed energy systems, battery storage facilities, these are not futuristic experiments here. They are practical solutions to everyday needs. And then there is offshore wind. The waters surrounding the Philippines have some of the highest technical offshore wind potential in Southeast Asia. International developers see vast coastlines with strong wind speeds and relatively shallow waters in certain zones. Early-stage service contracts have already been awarded, and feasibility studies are underway. Offshore wind projects require significant capital, billions of dollars per development. That scale naturally attracts global players rather than purely domestic firms. But it is not only large multinationals driving this shift. Private equity firms, climate funds, and green infrastructure investors are entering joint ventures with Filipino companies. Local conglomerates are pivoting aggressively into renewables, divesting from coal, and forming international partnerships. There is a sense of momentum, and momentum attracts more capital. There is also a geopolitical layer to all of this. Energy security is national security. Recent global disruptions, from pandemics to geopolitical conflicts, have shown how fragile fossil fuel supply chains can be. Countries dependent on imported coal or fuel are exposed to price shocks and supply bottlenecks. The Philippines imports a significant portion of its fossil fuels. Renewable energy, by contrast, is domestic. The wind is local. The sun is local. The geothermal heat beneath the earth is local. Investors understand that governments will increasingly prioritize energy independence. Supporting renewable infrastructure today positions them at the center of tomorrow's energy stability. Of course, this transformation is not without risks. The Philippine grid infrastructure still requires modernization. Interconnection bottlenecks can delay projects. Regulatory complexity, while improving, remains a challenge. Land acquisition and community consultations must be handled carefully. And climate risks themselves, typhoons, floods, require resilient design and engineering. Global investors are not blind to these issues. But sophisticated capital does not expect perfection. It evaluates risk against reward. And in the Philippines, many investors believe the reward justifies the risk. There is also something harder to quantify: optimism. Travel to renewable project sites in Ilocos Norte, in Nueva Ecija, in parts of Mindanao, and you will hear similar stories. Farmers leasing land for solar farms earning stable income. Engineers returning from overseas to work on green infrastructure. Local governments proud to host projects that place their towns on the map. For decades, the Philippine economy has been associated heavily with remittances and service industries. Renewable energy offers a chance to build hard infrastructure that generates domestic value for generations. Global investors sense that narrative shift. They are not just betting on kilowatts and megawatts, they are betting on a structural transformation, one where the Philippines transitions from energy vulnerability to energy leadership within the region. And timing matters. Renewable technology costs have fallen dramatically over the past decade. Solar panels are cheaper. Wind turbines are more efficient. Battery storage is improving rapidly. What was once financially marginal is now commercially competitive, even without heavy subsidies. In many cases, new solar and wind projects can produce electricity at costs comparable to or cheaper than new fossil fuel plants. That economic reality changes the equation entirely. For investors managing climate-focused portfolios, the Philippines offers scale, growth, and alignment with global sustainability goals. For traditional infrastructure investors, it offers long-term contracted cash flows in a growing market. For strategic players, it offers regional positioning in Southeast Asia's evolving energy landscape. But beyond spreadsheets and financial models, there is a deeper story. In a country repeatedly tested by storms, rebuilding with cleaner, more resilient systems carries symbolic weight. Renewable energy projects are not just business ventures. They are statements about the future. A future where power outages are less frequent, where electricity costs stabilize, where economic growth is less tied to imported fuel prices, where climate commitments are not just promises on paper. When global investors say they are betting everything, they do not mean recklessness. They mean conviction. They see a country at an inflection point, a young nation with rising energy demand, a government signaling openness to foreign participation, a global financial system pivoting toward sustainability, technologies finally mature enough to deploy at scale, and a climate reality that makes inaction more expensive than action. Put all of that together, and the picture becomes clear. The Philippines is no longer just a promising renewable market. It is becoming one of the most strategic, sustainable energy frontiers in Asia. And for global investors searching for the next long-term growth story, one that combines returns with responsibility, that frontier is hard to ignore.